The spice route, exploring the legendary trade of spices. The spice route, a journey through the world of spices, is an exhibition at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, London. It tells the story of how Europeans became obsessed with spices, and how this obsession led to exploration, trade, and colonization across the globe. The story begins in 12th century Baghdad. Spices were not just for flavoring food, but had religious and medicinal properties too. Cinnamon was used by priests in their incense, and nutmeg could ward off the plague. As a result, they were incredibly valuable. But then, Venice took control of the spice trade from the Arabs and established a monopoly, controlling the supply of spices to Europe. But as time went on, Europeans became greedy and wanted more spices for more money. And so began the quest to find a sea route to Asia. The exhibition is divided into 4 sections: Baghdad, Venice, the Quest, and Empire. Each section is beautifully designed and brings the story to life through maps, models, and interactive exhibits. There are also lots of opportunities to smell the different spices and even try some of them in food and drinks. I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of the exhibition and share some of the highlights. We'll start in Baghdad, where it all began. Here we have a recreation of a 12th century spice merchant's shop. Look at all these wonderful spices. Can you name that spice? Pause the video and see how many you can identify. But spices weren't just for flavoring food. They had other uses too. Incense was an important part of religious ceremonies, and the smoke was believed to carry prayers to God. Nutmeg and mace were used to ward off the plague. In fact, people believed that the plague was a punishment from God for the sins of man. So they would cover themselves in these spices to protect themselves from the disease. But why did Europeans become so obsessed with spices? Well, there were 2 main reasons. The first was greed. The spice trade was a very profitable business, and Europeans wanted more money. The second reason was religion. They believed that spices could improve the flavor of food and make it more enjoyable. This is because spices were seen as a gift from God, and if you had them, your food was more likely to taste good. The exhibition explains how the Arab world controlled the trade in spices, and how they transported them across the Red Sea to Egypt, and then on to Europe via Venice. The Venetian Republic was a powerful maritime state in the Mediterranean, and by the 13th century they had established a monopoly on the spice trade. This meant that they controlled the supply of spices to Europe and could set the prices. But this didn't last forever. As the demand for spices grew, so did the profits. And other European states like Portugal and Spain wanted a piece of the action. They knew that the Arabs were getting rich from the trade and wanted to find a way to get spices without having to go through Venice. This is when the age of exploration began. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to reach India by sea in 1498, but they couldn't compete with the vast resources of the other European powers. The Spanish, French, and English established colonies in the Americas and Asia and began to dominate the spice trade. The next section of the exhibition is called The Quest. It tells the story of how Europeans searched for a sea route to Asia and the discoveries they made along the way. There is a replica of Christopher Columbus's ship, the Mayflower, and a model of Vasco da Gama's ship, the São Gabriel. These ships are important because they symbolize the beginning of the age of exploration. Christopher Columbus was an Italian explorer who was trying to find a westward route to Asia. He believed that the Earth was smaller than what was generally believed at the time, and set sail for the Americas in 1492. Vasco da Gama was a Portuguese explorer who was trying to find a sea route to India. He sailed around the tip of Africa and reached India in 1498. But it wasn't just about finding a new route to Asia. It was also about finding new sources of wealth. The explorers were looking for gold, silver, spices, and other valuable goods. They also wanted to find new lands to conquer and rule over. One of the most interesting exhibits in this section is a map showing the different routes taken by the explorers. It's amazing to see how they charted the unknown and how they discovered new lands. Another interesting exhibit is a model of the São Gabriel, the ship that Vasco da Gama used to reach India. It's a reminder of the incredible journeys that these explorers undertook. The third section of the exhibition is called Empire. It tells the story of how European powers colonized Asia and the impact this had on the world. There are lots of interesting exhibits in this section, but one of the most impressive is a model of a Portuguese trading post. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to establish a trading post in Asia. They used these posts to store goods and as a base for their ships. Another interesting exhibit is a painting of a spice plantation in Indonesia. This shows how European powers exploited the colonies for their own gain. They grew crops such as cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, and then shipped them back to Europe to sell for profit. But it wasn't just the plants that they were interested in. They also wanted the animals that produced the spices. So they began to hunt wild animals and ship them back to Europe. One of the most popular exhibits in this section is a diorama showing the arrival of the British East India Company in India. This is an important moment in history because it marks the beginning of British rule in India. The East India Company was a trading company that was formed in 1600. It was given a royal charter by Queen Elizabeth I that granted it the right to trade with the East Indies. The company quickly became a powerful force in India and eventually ruled over much of the country. The final section of the exhibition is called Legacy. It tells the story of how the spice trade has shaped the world we live in today. One of the most interesting exhibits in this section is a display showing the different ways that spices are used around the world. From cooking to medicine to religion, spices have a lot of uses. They are an important part of many cultures and traditions. Another interesting exhibit is a film showing how spices are grown and harvested today. This gives us an insight into the hard work that goes into producing the spices we use every day. We also get to see the different methods used to grow and harvest different spices. Some are picked by hand, while others are machine-picked. Some are dried and ground into powder, while others are sold whole. Overall, I think this is a fantastic exhibition. It's really well laid out and it covers a lot of ground. I learned a lot about the spice trade and how it has shaped our world. If you're interested in history or geography or just want to learn something new, I highly recommend checking it out. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.